Confirm as true, Councillor Ward, the minutes. Otherwise, we're in a bit of a state. Thank you. That being the case, I will sign them, although I'd rather think you should, Ian, but I'll do it for you. Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Have we got any declarations of interest? Julie?
Non-pecuniary, Chair. I am the local member for one half of the Harbour.
Thank you. We'll move on to public question time. We've got 15 minutes allocated for that. Ian, have we had any public questions? We've had no public questions and there are no members of the public. That's very good. Therefore, we'll move on to item 4, which is our finance report. That's pages 9 and 12 in our papers. Again, not being at the last few committee meetings, I'm happy to hear any comments from, again, Ian, since you were around. I'm afraid it's, you could have done this meeting on your own, Ian, actually. But there we are. Any comments on those items that fall on our finance report between pages 9, 10, 11 and 12?
Give a very brief overview.
Please do.
Sorry. If we look at Newport Harbour first, you can see at the moment in that forecast under an overspend, which is the forecasted prediction for the year. As far as expenditure is concerned, we have a slight underspend at the minute. Not considerable, but so it's very early days. There's a forecasted underspend of 22,000. And we've seen on the income side a slight under recovery of income estimated at £7,000, which is probably only to be expected because of the impact of COVID. I think the only thing that is beginning to show as patterns this early in the year, and just probably worth noting as a point, is the increase in the lease income on Newport Harbour in and above the budget. And I'd like to think, with the work that we've done on the Harbour revision order and the further work that we're going to do on the leases and licences there, that will continue and give us a very good result at the end of the year. Ventnor Harbour, there's a lot smaller harbour, possibly a lot less to comment on over the page, but you can see that the expenditure is an overspend of 19,000. This a forecasted overspend of 19,000 for the year. That is largely attributed to the increase in the removal of seaweed, which is the ongoing issue we have at Ventnor Harbour, which we are looking at various options to try to resolve. And the income is very small on Ventnor Harbour anyway, and you can just see that there is a very small impact on income against the budget. That's it really. I mean, obviously, as we move through the year, and this is a regular meeting, we'll be able to get a better pattern of where we're like to be at the end of the year, because we're obviously very early in the year at this stage. But it's certainly a little bit easier to look at this than it was last year when we were in the middle of COVID. So it's beginning to return to some sort of normality. Thank you.
Any questions from what you've heard? Chris, and I'll come to you, Chris. So Chris Q, Chris J.
It might be not the right time in the agenda to cover it, but in the papers further on, it talks about the pumping of the seaweed out of the harbour.
Yeah.
Well, it seems if you just pump it out of the harbour with currents, it will come back in. Is that an issue?
Yeah, that's about what happens.
So is there a better way of doing it?
Sean, please
Thank you, Chair.
address that. Thank you for that, Chris.
The current methodology involves, we've got a contract with Cheetah Marine. Cheetah Marine have a purpose-built vessel which sucks up the seaweed through the base of the vessel, macerates it and pumps it over the wall. So whilst a certain amount may come back into the harbour, it doesn't actually come back in as live seaweed. It's been macerated. The problem we have with the amount of seaweed which comes into the harbour is the orientation of the entrance, and a considerable amount of work has been undertaken over the last 3 or 4 years to ascertain a solution to that. And essentially the solution is to completely reconfigure the harbour and the entrance to avoid that from happening. It's a very expensive solution to an expensive revenue problem, I'm afraid. Yeah, I wondered if there's an opportunity for us to capitalise on the seaweed. Do we actually sell it to anybody who processes taffy, for example, or can we turn it into compost, or can we simply leave it to dry eventually and send it over to the waste management plant to be burnt there for fuel, generating electricity and heat, etc.? More productive uses of it, really. Okay. Thank you, Chris. The council is currently in partnership with Venter Town Council and has a EU project which is looking at alternative uses of the seaweed, which would do exactly that. So looking at harvesting it for cosmetics, harvesting it for energy, for compost on the land, and even the potential of food. The consultants have had several meetings with both the Town Council and ourselves, and they've expanded the scope of the project to actually include looking at seaweed recovery on beaches around the island, which within the council's ownership, looking at the volumes, because the volumes will help dictate the most appropriate means and most cost-effective means of actually processing that and seeing a return from it. So that is actually work in process at the moment. Perhaps we could get an update on the next meeting, how that's going and what the financials look like. Okay, no problem at all.
It's all right, Chair. It was just a general observation. Obviously, this is a fairly newish committee, and I just think it's worthwhile remembering when we are on this committee, we have to put our harbour hats on. So that's the focus of this, because I know there's been some confusion in the past with other members about what their function was here. I don't know if Alex, if you would want to just, is that all right, Chair? So I just thought sometimes it just to scene set a little bit more. Just I've been on this committee for a little while and just see how it happens sometimes.
Thank you, Julie. Absolutely well made point, and certainly Chris and I would welcome that. I don't know if, and probably Chris Quirk also. Ian's an old timer and been through it, but sorry, I don't mean that in disrespect for Ian, but yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Councillor, it might just be worth saying, obviously, this committee is, as Julie said, a slightly different committee and does consider a lot more operational issues because it is a requirement of us as a statutory harbour. One thing that I think we will need to do fairly quickly, and we've done it for previous incarnations of members on this particular meeting, is to undertake the training for this committee in terms of your roles and responsibilities. So that's an action for all incoming new members, and it's normally our delegated authority. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to add, the training should be in everyone's diary for Tuesday the 27th of July at 10 a.m. till midday. The training's being delivered by David Foster. David Foster is our designated person to ensure we continue to be compliant with the Port Marine Safety Code. He's delivered, as Ian will remember, previous training sessions to this committee on the requirements of the Port Safety Code and members' duties under that code. So that's actually in the diary now.
Can I just say, could you clarify, Sean, Alex, is that statutory training? Do we have to be there? And if we haven't had that statutory training, like planning, that would threaten the quorum, us being quorum.
It's not statutory training. It is Newport and Venter are both statutory harbours, and the Harbour Committee is effectively the duty holder
under the Port Marine Safety Code. So to ensure members are aware of their obligations under the code, it would be advisable to undertake the training.
So it would be helpful if we could be there, colleagues. Chris, please.
Just a clarification, really. The duty holders, I know it's probably straying onto the training ground, but just to remind me, the duty holder, is that still the cabinet? Okay, so that's why it's really important that we understand our duties. Yeah.
Could I then ask that on Ventnor, the contract for the seaweed removal, if I remember correctly, ends next year, maybe March, if there are plans for that eventuality?
You're quite correct, Chair. The contract was awarded for 2 years. It's due to expire on the 31st of March next year. We will shortly be entering into a dialogue with the existing supplier regarding possibility of entering into a new contract or... Sorry. Yeah, the contract ends on the 31st of March next year. It was a 2-year contract. We are shortly going to start having negotiations with the existing contractor regarding a new contract, because obviously they've got the specialist equipment to undertake it. If we're unable to do that, we will need to go out to the market and offer it as a tender opportunity. So yes, it is in hand.
To you.
Thank you very much. So between March and the end of May, the harbour has been opened after a fashion. We haven't had the facilities open, but we have had visitors still come down onto the pontoons in line with the COVID restrictions. For most of the time, we've had our labouring staff furloughed. So they came back on the beginning of May, and then they've been spending most of their time catching up with all the winter maintenance tasks they would have normally done, but were unable to. Things going down, the COVID vaccination centre, which is based in the Riverside, has increased footfall through the Harbour estate, and also that we've opened up, we've got a one-way system running through it, but that seems to be working very well. And then the main one was we've had the dredger that turned up and has been working, and they were working at the end of this. Other than that, we've sort of been doing as much as we've been able to with the restrictions we've had in place. The visitors' numbers have obviously been heavily affected because for good chunks of it they weren't allowed to visit, and plus our full facilities haven't been fully operational because of it as well. But in general, we've been catching up with our winter maintenance tasks.
Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jonathan, for your report. Just looking at the COVID response with the parking charges, is that being reimbursed by the NHS to the Harbour account?
I'm not entirely sure. I believe it's only, but Sean.
Yes. Oh, that's lovely. Just for members' information, we have our own car parking that gets reimbursed into the Harbour account. So it's quite important income. The other thing, I've received a question from Mr. Dodd regarding the permission for works on the repair of the harbour walls. I don't know if anyone's seen that or anyone's responded regarding that, and have we got all the permissions as he's suggesting that we needed? Thank you.
Any comments on that?
Well, I can answer. We've received that in writing. I think the early part of last week, or the later part of last week, and we'll respond to that in due course. I've just need to discuss a little bit of it with Sean, but I've written about half of it. One of the points has been raised on numerous occasions. The second one about the Harbour Wars is something we need to respond to.
Yeah, 'cause I think some of them are listed, aren't they? I think that was one of his main thrusts of his points, was having the correct permissions to do that. That was all. So, thank you.
Alex, could you just expand on that for us that don't have that background? There's a question about that. Julie's explained that it may involve listed walls. Is that the thrust of the question that's been asked? And is it something this committee needs to be aware of?
It was a 2-point inquiry. The first point was about the Harbour revision order and the lack of a map as part of the Harbour revision order. Whilst you could have a map with a Harbour revision order, the MMO have confirmed that we don't need to have a map, and they have written to him on that behalf. He's not happy with that response, and it's been an ongoing saga for quite some time. We cannot really respond any more than just to say what the MMO as a statutory authority has said to us, and the Harbour revision order was granted on the 10th of March this year anyway. So I think it's resolved itself by where we got to. The second part of it, I think we need to look at in a little bit more detail, which is to do with the ownership of the walls, but we'll respond to that in writing to him, and we'll share that with you as well.
You're happy with that, Julie? I had the mess. We must have all had the inquiry, did we? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The whole island had it. Yeah.
The answer to the first question, yes.
Yes, the answer, as far as the statutory body is concerned, which is the MMO, is yes, we have done the right thing and that the HRO has been granted. I can't say that he's happy with that, but yeah.
I think,
thank you, Alex.
Sorry, I've got my microphone. So I think it's probably safe that we probably get copied in because we are the duty holders. That's why, yeah.
Sorry, Jonathan.
It was just regarding the furlough and in the operational side of your report, Jonathan, you're saying that the Harbour labourers were back from 9 till 2 Monday to Friday. Are they fully back at work now, or is that going to be an ongoing times they'll be working?
At present, they're still on their 9 till 2. So we will be bringing them back shortly. But at the moment, it works quite well. It gives them 5 hours that they can crack on, do it, and then go. So they're not, yeah.
Presumably, when we come out of the more COVID restrictions, more people come back to the harbour, then they can just go back, slot back in.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The major report we got was just south of Island Harbour, so down from the Folly. I walked both the whole length from Newport all the way up to Island Harbour. It was only a localised area just south of Island Harbour. Walked round. We had no reports of any sunk boats. There was nothing running automatic bilge pumps. It was dispersing very well on the wind and the tide. It was quite a thin sheen over it, but it was quite a strong smell of diesel, but that was mainly near Island Harbour. And we had no other reports from that.
Thank you. Jonathan, I can't quite see it in the report, but you do talk about water monitoring. Do you monitor, or do you get reports from Southern Water for when foul sewage goes into the harbour? Does that happen?
The water monitoring that's listed in the reports is that we have an outside contractor that comes down weekly to double check that our water supply on the pontoons and on the quay is correct and we're not suffering any risk of Legionnaire's disease, although we do state it as the pontoon, so they just double check the temperature is fine and they flow it through. And then we also had a risk assessment on the water main system to just double check we didn't have any dead legs. Southern Water as such do not give us supply if they have an overflow. But that doesn't really affect the operations. If it was a problem that we'd get reports of it, then obviously we would record it as pollution.
I noticed on a report I saw this morning, there's a lot of raw materials gone straight into the watercourses over the last couple of days, all the rain we've had. So I just wondered about the situation in the harbour. Obviously, there's so many people living around it. It's not very pleasant. But no, I think just the water monitoring, of course, that's where you picked up that we had the issue with our water fountain, didn't we? That the community council, that was picked up during one of those monitoring, wasn't it? So yeah, thank you for
that. Chris.
Yes, Chair. Just for information, we do have a monitoring link through to Southern Water and to the Environment Agency, and the link which covers all of the beaches on the island. You can specify where you want the reports to come into, and that comes into the Isle of Wight Council beach officer, and she monitors that and then actions it accordingly. I'd suggest it might be a good idea if we were to add the outfalls into the harbours onto her watch list, and then she could advise accordingly rather than having a separate monitoring exercise online. And you could just say what you want to do. If there's, level 1, level 2, or level 3 discharge of material, what to do about it.
Thanks, Chris. Is that a action point we can take from the meeting and action it and actually report back to us how it's been actioned? Thank you. Further questions? Jonathan, I've just said, are you covered off on A and B of your Get Well plan and seen your report, page 1520? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, the Get Well plan is, I didn't touch on, but that is sort of following from our last Port Marine Safety Code inspection audit that was carried out. And there were a couple of the outstanding points. Some of them are sort of the general directions, which are with the legal department at the moment, and a couple of other things we're moving towards. But yeah, they're going in the right direction, because that did start off a lot longer than that.
Are we happy with our Get Well plan? Seems it's going in the right direction. What do you think, Ian?
Just for the purpose of clarity and history, really. I mean, the Port Marine Safety Code is something the council hasn't had for its statutory harbour for many years, and we took it upon ourselves when we took on in this facility at Newport in the first instance to make sure that we were Port Marine Safety Code compliant, and we've been working through that for a number of years to bring the harbour up to standard. And we are very close to fulfilling that obligation, and we would report back each time on the Get Well plan of where we're at with that. But one would just suggest that we're probably in the closing throes of that, having been dealing with that over the last number of years. But it will be, I think, quite a big achievement for Newport Harbour to gain that. So.
If I may just say thank you, Chair, on behalf of the harbour members and harbour users. This is a massive step forward, having this committee and having the Get Well plan, and all of the focus on the safety is really crucial. And obviously then it will enable us to have not only a compliant but a better environment for everybody. And as Councillor Jarman's alluded to, that we can earn us some money as well for the harbour.
Thanks, Julie. Are there any risks that are coming out of the Get Well plan? We're nearly there, Alex comments, which is really good news. Are there any risks that we should be aware of?
I don't think there's any risks that are worth commenting on today necessarily. I think when we do the training with you all, some of those potential risks will be highlighted, and it will also, it was seen from when you have that training how important Port Marine Safety Code compliance is in making sure we deliver things properly and safely. I think when you come away from that training, I think in the past it's been very informative.
You happy with that? We're happy with that? Okay. And for that update, it's appreciated by us all. I'll move on to PMSC Audit. Sorry, pages 21 to 58 for Ventnor Harbour.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You have in front of you the full audit report and findings for information and review. I'll just briefly go through some key points. I won't go through it in detail. As we've been told, Ventnor Harbour is a statutory port and has its own 1994 Harbour Revision Order. As a statutory port, it should operate in accordance with the Port Marine Safety Code as Newport and be able to demonstrate compliance with the code. In October 2019, the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency undertook a health check of Newport, Ryde and Ventnor Harbours, and the findings were presented to the then Harbour Committee. Whilst Newport Harbour was working towards Port Marine Safety Code compliance, neither Ventnor or Ryde were, although their operational procedures reflected those that were in place at Newport. It was agreed to amend the terms of reference for this committee to include both Ryde and Ventnor within the area of responsibility. Marico, who are the providers of the designated person role for Newport Harbour, submitted a fee bid at our request to undertake the role of designated person for Ventnor Harbour, and the council undertook to mirror the arrangements for Newport through the establishment of standalone processes and systems for Ventnor. The audit, which you have in front of you, was undertaken on the 21st of May this year, represents the first step in becoming compliant with the Port Marine Safety Code. And as we did at Newport, we will work with Marico to develop a Get Well plan, which is both achievable and proportionate to the facility, recognising it's a considerably smaller operation than Newport. There's a draft Get Well plan included within the Marico report. We'll develop this into a standalone document and we'll bring that back to subsequent Harbour Committee meetings to report on progress, update and any issues in achieving compliance. We'll welcome any questions.
Thank you for that, Sean. Any questions on audit? Chris Jai, and I'll come to you, Chris.
I've got a few. Maybe if I just go through them rather than asking one after the other. If you want to make some notes and then come back on them. The first one is that the audit doesn't, we have a separate financial reporting process for the harbours, and the audit didn't include anything on the financials. I just want to clarify that that was an intention, that it was a more of an operational audit, not a financial audit. That's the first question. The second one is that as a distinct operation, we now have to provide statements reflecting carbon neutrality and plan for carbon neutrality building into the future. And indeed, for many operations which are independently financially reported, the 10% net gain on carbon status. And I didn't see anything to those points. The third one is, given that we have a Harbour Committee and we produce separate accounts for the Harbour, does this committee actually sign off and approve the Harbour accounts, or are they simply amorphous within the overall Isle of Wight Council accounts? Because I think if we're dealing, as we are here in this document, with financials, we should have a distinct view of what the financial performance are and see those accounts before they're amalgamated. That's number 3. And the fourth point is, we're just in the process of doing a review of Isle of Wight Council assets. Small project. Sorry, small project. And from that, it appears we don't have any harbour assets, which I find quite difficult to believe.
Thank you, Chris.
Sorry, it was 4 questions, Chair.
No, that's okay. More interesting questions, if I might say. Alex, however you.
I can probably answer the first and third one. In terms of the finance reports, yes, they do come to this committee. I think they came to the last committee actually for approval. We have to publish those in a certain way anyway, as a statutory report, and there is a separate report on those as well. So I think in terms of the first question, does this wellbeing audit include the finance stuff? No, it doesn't, but that is covered elsewhere, but it probably should have referred to it at the very least. I'm not sure about the carbon status, something we can discuss with Marika. And I'm not sure about the assets. I mean, it's included on the asset register, isn't it, Harbours? Because Sean updates those each year, so it should be.
Maybe it's a separate one. Maybe it's just not amalgamated in the bulk one that we've got hold of recently. Perhaps we could have an action to let us have the asset list.
No, each year we have to complete the asset register, and obviously Sean particularly manages a lot of assets, and all those will be included on that list. But we can check for you, Councillor. Certainly.
There are separate ones from finance, and a separate one that covers odd things like beach huts. Yeah. There's also a separate asset list, which is what Chris Ashman's produced, which is a sort of a plan, and then a fourth asset document we've obtained, which is principally the motor vehicles, and they're not the same. So we're just going through them all, trying to work out what the differences are and sort it out, really. But I think if we can get one for Harbours, that would be very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Sorry.
There were a couple of, please, Sean, yeah.
Just in terms of carbon neutrality, that is not currently a requirement stated under Port Marine Safety Code in terms of an audit, but we will raise it with Marika to establish, because they are involved in the development of the Port Marine Safety Code as a significant company in the marine industry. So I'll ask them for their views on that. And by all means, I will contact finance and ask for a copy of the asset register for our directorate, because the way I've seen it structured is it's by directorate and then it's by service. And I know it includes Newport and Ventnor Harbour, so I can certainly forward that to all committee members.
I'm wondering if it's a separate list because they are treated separately and distinctly within the council. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. It would seem already, so it would seem sensible that the assets and the value of those assets would be accounted for separately.
Okay, we take that as an action, please. There was a fourth question, I believe. 4. That was 1, 2, and 3, I think. What was the fourth one, Chris?
I think you did 1 and 3 together at the beginning. Yeah.
Question 4.
No, I think we've got it. So we know it didn't include the financials, but it should include a reference to them. So
it was probably me. Apologies. We've received the audit. If there's no further questions, we've received it. I'm sorry, Chris, of course.
In terms of an audit, this does a good job because it shows all of the areas, it asks the questions and says, in a lot of areas, N, which I'm sure stands for no. And then we have a comments box, and the comments box says, see draft get well plan, which we haven't got. But I think it would be better if it says address in the get well plan, or fail to be addressed in the get well plan, or we haven't any idea what we're doing with this, because at present it shows that we're failing on a lot of things, but it doesn't actually give any reassurance that we're going in the right direction to sort it. And I think it could be, lessons to be learned for reports like this in the future. Actually put the information in the report so that it's a standalone report, not a report you've got to have other pieces of paper at the same time.
Thank you, Chris. A point well made, actually. Any comments, Alex and Sean, on that?
Thank you, Chris. I would just point out on page 2, there is the draft Get Well plan that Marika have produced as a way of moving forward on pages 2, 3, 4 and 5. And as we did with Newport, we will turn that into a Get Well plan in the format which was presented earlier in relation to Newport. That sets out the current position and suggest what we should be doing to rectify that. And we'll build upon that with a further level of detail, a lead officer and a target date. And that's what we'll report against at subsequent Harbour meetings.
Chris?
I thought there was a positive answer, but it's not apparent from reading the document.
Yeah, I can't say it. It's a bit like a revolving door, a bit, isn't it? You've got to chase to get well planned. Yeah.
It's very, whenever you see something that's not clear, you wonder if it's being fudged. And it's sort of, you know, it raises questions that don't need to be asked, because I don't think it's being fudged. But I think there are answers to the things that we're working on it. It's going in the right direction, but it doesn't say that.
Thank you, Chris. In a spirit of openness and transparency, I will ask if it's being fudged. No, Chris. Julie.
Oh, thank you. Just an observation, really, Chair. It's just good that all the work that was previously done at Newport Harbour has been, you know, sort of levered and helped the plans here in Ventnor. And any RIDE members present might want to cast an eye on this as well for their forthcoming acquisition. Say no more.
Thank you, Julie. Point well made. This item 7, members' question times. If we haven't had enough, are there any other questions? You must have some questions. You've down here and come and ask the question. Chris.
Just a comment. The Conservative group will be swapping our membership slightly, because we're going to have representatives of the areas where the harbours are on the board. I will still come to the training, so that if at some stage I have to come back, I can. And I've advised Marie as to who the people will be. So just to alert you to the fact that there will be some slight tweaks to our committees.
Well, that's noted, Alex. Sean, please. Thank you.
Just a suggestion, once we come out of these restrictions, that perhaps the committee could go on a tour of Ventnor and of Newport Harbour. I know you can see it out the window, but it might be useful to see what's happening on the ground. We've done that for quite some time, I don't think, have we? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how about members feel about that. You want a day trip out to Ventnor, have an ice cream? It's a lovely ice cream.
I will speak for my successors. Yes, they would like it.
And Ian likes an ice cream, so Ian will come. Yeah. Julie, it's a good idea. There are 5 of us here. I'm happy to do that. I've been to both a number of times, if Chris is happy to do it. But if Chris can't or is unavailable, and same for Ian, it would just leave us 3. I'm happy to do that if that's what you wish.
Because, of course, don't forget, we've got White Gates as well, haven't we, in Newport Harbour, and the Folly, so there's quite a lot to look at, really. Vote. Is it on our asset list? Councillor Jarman?
Have you got a rib, Jonathan? I'm happy to talk about it if we want to do it. I'm happy to do it, Julie. But it's Chris is reluctant, and Ian's
I think it might help our questioning in future if we can. You know, we're talking about on the ground. Sometimes you pick. It's like having a site visit, a planning, isn't it? You always pick up extra things when you're on the ground. So
okay, but point made, and perhaps we'll look at that at some future.
Sorry, just a question. Would you want to walk the land-based assets and then go up the river to actually see them from a different perspective? Would you want to walk the land-based assets of the Harbour estate and then go up the river?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Chris.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One is, you've probably seen that we've been putting out safety buoys at various places around the island, and we put them out at Cornwall and Totland just very recently. They're not quite being adhered to yet, but I think a little bit of enforcement and hopefully people will get the very clear message of what the line actually means. And I wondered whether we had any plans to do a similar thing within any of the harbours or harbour environments, or even on the wider entrance part of it to the Medina.
Alex?
Not at present. I mean, we've obviously been involved with that programme anyway, through Sean and Trish Stillman, who's responsible for our beaches. We've done them around the island, tend to be focused, as you know, on the tourist areas, and trying to make sure that we restrict those personal water safety crafts on those areas. There was at one stage a set of buoys out on one of our harbours, which was out at Wootton, because there used to be a ski lane across there, but it wasn't being used. So we haven't reinstated those as far as I'm aware, Sean. Not the case, is it? I don't think we've got any plans for them. It may come up in terms of when we do the work on our general directions, if it comes up as a requirement on that, but I can't really say it, to be honest.
Or maybe the Wootton boys will come up on our asset list, for all we know. Just a final one then is, on the documents that I had coming into this, I had some maps which showed the extent of the land which the harbours actually formerly were, but it didn't on any of the maps actually say who the boundary responsibility was. That's just a legal thing, I know, probably not terribly important unless you have a dispute about it. But I know it came up recently on the fencing, which is at the back of the Premier Inn, where it had to be replaced. And I didn't know from that, you couldn't tell from the boundary map that I saw whether it was our responsibility, the fence, or theirs.
Yeah, I think in those cases, we just need to reference back to the original lease, because the leases might vary and they might not be uniform. And we have all the leases on file, so we can quite easily check that. And just to come back, sorry, to the previous point around buoys within harbours, certainly in terms of Newport, we undertook a comprehensive navigational risk assessment exercise with Marico approximately 18 months ago, which looked at all elements of water usage, whether it's recreational or commercial. And there was no need flagged up as part of that assessment for the provision of buoys at that time. That is subject to an annual review. Obviously, if that did flag up, the situation had changed and there was a need or a demand for it, then it's something we would revisit and look at the funding for it.
Thanks, Sean.
I've got a feeling, Councillor Jarman, that Jonathan, you said that the Premier Inn had fixed that fence, hadn't they? That was in the previous report. If I wasn't at that last committee meeting, I'm not on the list, so I know it was a recent one, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But yeah.
I know it can just be it's a finicky thing, but it's good we've got somebody here that says lawyer, so it's a good title. But when it's the same on my home. If I've got a boundary around my home, I want to know who each estate with, and particularly if you've got walls that might be listed or fences that need to be repaired periodically, some of those can be quite substantial costs. And I think it would be very good if we had very distinctive maps that actually showed all the boundaries and whose responsibility they were. I mean, it's a typical thing on every deed, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, if I can just add, it's boundary disputes are particular. Oh, sorry. Sorry, thank you very much. Sorry, yeah, I'd just like to add the boundary disputes are notoriously complicated and difficult, but is something we can certainly look at and provide work with my fellow officers and work that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, Ian, Julie, Chris, no more questions. That being the case, at 3:45 or thereabouts, that's the end of the meeting. See you all next time.
Chair.